My research presentation was the effects of noise pollution on zebrafinch responses to predator calls. I'm Kena Jean, and my mentor was John P. Swaddle at the William and Mary's Institute for Integrative Conservation. I studied how noise pollution affects zebra finches. So some important introductions would be what noise pollution is and some info on zebra finches. So noise pollution is anthropogenic or human-generated noise that usually harms or causes stress on the environment around it. Some examples are traffic and construction, which are more urban examples, and lawnmowers, which are more suburban. Um, Zebra finches are native to Australia, and their predators include the whistling kite, which is the audio that we used in this study. They're good for scientific inquiry due to the rapid reproduction and maturity rates, as well as their generally social behavior that allows for group activity and analysis. Some prior knowledge is that noise pollution can negatively affect organisms' overall fitness down to the cellular level, which can include brain damage, hormonal changes, reproduction rates being decreased or reproduction being affected. Some maternal behaviors were less in more stressful environments with more noise pollution. Some other prior studies that we looked into included one that we mostly modeled our study off of with the traffic noise drowning out the great tit alarm calls. They did a study in the lab and in the field. And in the lab, the noise pollution nullified basically any reaction that the birds would have to the predator calls. And in the field, it was definitely decreased, but a little bit less. In the high levels of environmental noise, sometimes the pair preferences of zebra finches were eroded, and usually they are monogamous birds, but in these cases with more environmental noise, it would be more likely for a female to interact with a male that is not her mate in levels of high noise. And some of the other studies found that in areas with higher urban noise levels, the frequency of the bird calls were higher, and in order to compensate for the being able to be heard over the urban noise. Our purpose of our study was to explore if when a bird is chronically exposed to noise pollution, it affects their ability to hear and react to predatorial sounds. And some of our questions were whether a noise pollutant that's frequencies match more with the bird's call affect the birds more than the outlier frequencies. And we looked into that more in our pre-experimental studies where we compared different frequencies in relation to the birds' calls. And then after that, we chose construction noise because it had more variety. So we thought it'd be a better noise to focus on. Our main question, though, was what is the difference between the behavior of the finches at the time of expected response to predatorial calls based on whether a noise pollutant is also affecting that same environment? And basically, this is does the noise pollutant cover up the sound of the predator's calls? And do the birds adapt their reactions to adapt to the noise pollutant? Or do they stay the same? Or do they just not adapt at all and have no reaction to the predator call when the noise pollutant is played? Pretty much. Our hypothesis was that if a construction noise is played simultaneously with a natural predator call, then the zebra finches will have reduced or no reactions to the threat compared to whether the predator audio was played alone as in the control. Our methods and materials were we had two groups of zebra finches that were placed in separate rooms, and each room had two males and two females, and each was banded with their own individual color so that we could observe the individual birds and record the data for each bird. And each group was controlled under both the experiment and the control. The first few weeks, the first group had the experiment, and the audio was playing nonstop in the room that they were in, and the other room had the control birds. And then after I collected the data, for those respective rooms. They switched the speakers so that the one who had been having an experiment was now control, and the one who had been control was now going to be experiment. A few weeks later, after the new experimental room had been exposed to the construction noise for quite a little while, I collected the data on that and the new control. As a researcher, I spent 45 minutes in each room. 10 minutes were spent on each of the 4 birds, and the extra 5 minutes was in the very beginning as a acclimation period to make sure that we had every bird acclimated. And within those 10 minutes that I was observing each individual bird, the first 5 minutes was just straight up observations of that bird. At the 5-minute mark, I played the predator audio, and then the next 5 minutes was recording the data on post audio playing reactions, and to see how long it took for them to get back to normal, if they went back to normal, and if they reacted at all, and if the reactions were normal. And the data was recorded on how their habits and what there were and how they compared between control and experimental. This is just a little visual representation with the birds without construction noise and the birds with construction noise, both having the predator audios played, and just our hypothesis in the middle of the finches exposed to noise pollution will react less or not at all to the predator calls compared to the finches in the silence or control. Our results, or predicted results, would be that much like the study of noise pollution effects on great tits in the Templeton study, the results will most likely show noise pollution will be a factor that negatively affects the birds' fitness and survival. So basically, the birds will react less or not at all to the predator call when they are exposed to the construction audio, because it is a noise pollutant and it causes lots of stress and can make their brains not be able to focus as much. And according to the data that has so far been recorded and partially analyzed, the hypothesis is currently looking to be supported, but no solid conclusions can be drawn yet because we have not had complete time to meet and analyze the data completely to make any firm, solid conclusions that we can report back. And some conclusions that we could make and further discussions would be that if the study was successful, which it looks to be, further research would need to be done to fully comprehend the scope of noise pollutants' effects on wildlife, especially birds, and then they can also expand it to other animals and maybe even humans, and to reduce the effects of minimizing noise pollutants where possible. So those could be like engineering projects or even computer science projects where it makes technology that's quieter, like in a construction zone, so that, I don't know, a jackhammer or a large saw or trailer or even crane could just be quieter. So like construction noise wouldn't be 24/7 super loud, high decibel noises that affect the birds and any other animals in that area. Or even just engineering projects to like make the roads quieter so traffic and such is less of a nuisance. In addition to future research, more awareness and education on the topic of noise pollution could take place and have more funding and support, either in schools, in just general, different political leaders could influence this and help spread awareness of noise pollution, because before I started working with Professor Swaddle, I didn't really know what noise pollution was. But then once I looked into it, I found that it is actually a very important issue that can affect our biodiversity, which is obviously very important because every animal has its own niche in its environment and it needs to fill that niche so that all the other animals can also fill their own respective niches. In future studies, data collection could be closer together or in more even intervals, because due to my schedule and Professor Swaddle's schedule, we didn't get to meet as consistently and have an even interval for our experiment as much as we wanted to. And obviously, we know that the study needs to be expanded and more research needs to be done on birds or even other animals because although we haven't analyzed our data completely, we have already found that some of the results show that the birds were more fidgety and sometimes even just more tired in general and just acting strangely when they were under the effects of the constant noise pollutant. So it can definitely be a problem if animals are chronically exposed to noise pollution, and we should definitely explore that further. Some acknowledgements were I would love to thank my mentor, Professor John Swaddle, who has been very accommodating and very, very, very helpful over this whole project and has always been guiding me and making time when our schedules don't seem to match up. I would also like to thank William and Mary because they allowed high school students to work in their facilities and me specifically to work with their zebra finches, which is a really cool experience. And I'm very glad that I was able to do it. I would also like to thank Dr. Angela Ford and Miss Laura Vobrack for helping me learn background and research that helped me along this entire project and this whole year, making everything a little bit easier because I already knew a foundation of the things that I needed to do, and I just had to focus on the content. A special thanks to Governor School for giving me this opportunity in general, and my parents for always pushing me to do better and always supporting me. Here are my references, and I would like to thank you for watching this presentation from me and the zebra finches.